All right, I want to do a quick video before we get into events on something called helper functions. And this is not anything specific to React. It's just something that I like to do in JavaScript. And that is whenever you have a function that does something like formatting money, or let's take a look at like one of those examples here. We've got this little helper function here that formats money. And when you visit the actual homepage where the store picker is, it'll auto-populate it with a random store name that you have in there. All of these things, they're not specific to React, so it doesn't make sense for us to make them into a React component. It's just a regular JavaScript function. So what I like to do is I like to put those in a little file called helpers.js. And inside of there, we have all kinds of little helper functions. Like this one uses a format price where it takes in the amount of cents. It will divide it by 100. That's because we like to save all of our money in cents and then only display it in actual money. That's why we're dividing it by 100. And then we're going to format it as US currency. What else do we have in here? We have a function called slugify, which is just going to take in some sort of text and swap it out with a actual slug. We'll look at that more. And then this is the get fun name function where it's going to take like glamorous, halves, thoughtless, or repulsive. It's going to take just a bunch of random adjectives and a bunch of random nouns and put them into the URL there. And what I've done here is I've exported all of these functions from the helpers.js file. Now, this is different from than when we used to do the export default. And feel free to skip over this if you understand how this works. But I'll explain it real quick because I know that it could be a sticking point. Like, what's the difference between export default and just regular export? Well, if we open up our index.js, remember we talked about this? This is a default export from the React package. However, you can also export more things from a package if you'd like. And if you have more than one thing you like to export from a package, you can just export them as what's called the named exports, where you need to know the name of the method that you're importing. In this case, it's render, and then you have to use the curly bracket syntax. So if we go into our store picker and we want to import something from helpers.js, it's called get fun name. All we have to do is go up here and say import curly bracket get fun name. So not the whole helpers package, just get fun name from, and then we'll go into, I think it's a level up. Yeah. And then into helpers.js. Now we have this function called get fun name, and we can set it on our input. So you might think like it's a value of get fun name, but we're going to be talking about the difference between value and default value. And in React, if you put a value on an act here, let me just show you a value. Hello. If you put a value on an input, it's going to start yelling at you. It'll say failed prop type value to a form field without an on change handler. That's because values of inputs always need to be directly attached to state. And we're going to learn about that when we actually go to this part of the application where we have all these different inputs, and they are going to be tied to some data that when it changes, it will change everywhere else on the page. So if you just want some default text in an input, you need to use the default value attribute in React. And then we can set that to curly brackets because we're doing some JavaScript, get fun name parentheses. And that's going to, on when the component mounts to the page, it's going to run the get fun name. And that function is going to return a fun name. And then it should set the default value for us. So let's see here. Go back. There we go. Clumsy, lazy wives. I apologize if sometimes these are a little bit itchy potatoes. Apologize if they are somewhat offensive. I don't mean to be, but sometimes the adjectives with the nouns somehow become offensive. So apologies in advance there. Other than that, that is helper functions, and I'll see you in the next video.